Hello, everyone, and welcome to Biohackers Lab. I'm your host, Gary Cohen, and on today's episode, I have Leigh Ewin. Leigh is a health coach teaching people how to find their flow state. He uses various conscious breathing techniques, cold exposure training, and mindset techniques to help clients from all around the world. He holds instructor certifications in the Wim Hof method, oxygen advantage, breathology, and is a trained bulletproof coach. Leigh, thanks so much for coming on for an episode for today.
No worries, mate. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sure, and I really do mean it that I'm glad to have you on because I've been following you on Instagram for a long time. I've been wanting to get you on to talk about cold exposure after following lots of your pictures up there in Finland where you live and how you take nice dips in some very cold situations. So today I wanted to introduce people to the concept of cold thermogenesis or cold adaptation, and particularly start off with the question, are cold showers good for you? So we're going to explore that topic today.
Sounds good.
So my first question for you then is, why do you recommend cold exposure training when you're helping clients find their flow state?
Well, to be honest with you, I think how it all started for me was, I'm Australian and I ended up living, there's a lot of things that have to take place for an Australian to come to Finland all the way up here. And it's been 10 years, it's been like almost 11 years now. And of course, the relationship with the cold, like by Australian terms, 9 months of the year is sort of like winter up here. And you have to form some relationship with the cold. And we have a lovely thing called sauna. It's sauna or sauna. So that kind of helps. It kind of helps things along. But there is still this kind of resistance to the cold, and I would say more this we grasp a lot to the comfort. Everywhere you go, every room you set foot in, whether it's the car, this room, for example, where you are now, anywhere, shopping center, it's all controlled by technology. Like there's a climate control there. And over the course of time, you kind of like your it runs on efficiency. If it doesn't need to utilize energy in different areas, it won't do that. And then I guess what happens over time is you lose a little bit of that functionality. And that's why you'll see this situation where there's usually around Christmas time, or let's say about 1st or 2nd of January, you usually see the situation where the father of the family gets a new pair of running shoes and some Nike gear or whatever from Santa, and then on January 2nd, not the 1st because usually someone's had a few extra beers or something to celebrate, but January 2nd they want to go out there for running in the first time. And over here in Finland, if you're running outside in that time of the year, it's pretty cold. And so what happens is that person usually gets a little bit of a cold or a sniffle or something, and they're like, oh damn, I'm sick. And then they wonder why that happened, So I think we kind of we condition ourselves to, the functionality is not there inside the body anymore. So cold showers and the cold in general, I think it's something we should all be doing. We should, I'm kind of guiding people to at least take 30 seconds of their shower in the morning on full cold. At least end the shower like that. It's a good thing. It wakes you up. You get this, these happy hormones flood your body. You're alert, you're awake. And to be honest, in many cases, you don't even need to have a cup of coffee like for another hour or so after that. It's enough.
Yeah.
So my long-winded answer, but yes, of course the cold showers are good for you.
Yeah. So I think kind of if I had to summarize what you just said there too, is that naturally we would be exposed to ranges of temperature, but modern society now keeps temperature regulated very strictly and tightly, and we have the tech to be able to do that. But it's still a good thing that we are exposed to different ranges, and particularly even the colder ranges, that we get too scared of the cold, it sounds like. But there's benefits for humans to be exposed to even cold temperatures.
Yeah, absolutely. And further to that point, we're talking about this sort of like hormetic response. So a controlled burst of stress, basically. We understand that long sustained exposure to stress leads to inflammation in the body and all these other nasty things. But a small burst of stress, like a cold shower. I mean, we're familiar with stress, right? Like these short bursts of stress, like a sauna. So, you know, you're going to get used to me saying sauna, by the way. It's a Finnish word, so we say sauna. Fasting's a short burst of stress that on a cellular level allows your body to kick into some sort of like, some responses and opens up some pathways. We understand it when you go into the gym and you lift the biceps. You know, it's a short burst of stress. You're actually tearing tissue apart, but that kind of stress allows the body to grow again and repair the tissue and heal. There's other examples too, but the cold is an easy way. And the cold shower, it's so obvious. It's like everyone has a shower, I'm hoping, at some point during the day. And if you're having one in the morning, I mean, it makes perfect sense. It's a controlled burst of stress. It activates your body, wakes you up, and there's a lot of health benefits that come along with that, of course.
Yeah. And one of the health benefits that you mentioned there too was your immune system. So I know there's a few different things, and as I mentioned earlier in the intro, you're a Wim Hof method instructor. So I think a lot of people may be exposed to Wim Hof's method, and especially the really interesting stuff I was telling someone earlier today was when they took some people trained in Wim Hof and they put them in a ward in a hospital and they injected them, I think, or exposed them to like a bacteria. Yeah. And they didn't get the same sickness response that they expected because they were practicing breathing techniques and they'd been trained in it. So in this case here, and you mentioned it earlier too, with someone who gets sick when they go out on January the 2nd. So in this case, training ourselves to be cold adaptated, does this also help improve our immune system?
Yeah, exactly. Like that study was actually really interesting because I'm sure your viewers, people listening to this, probably know a little bit about Wim Hof. But just really quickly, I mean, he's somebody who has about 26 Guinness Book of Records. Pretty much all of them, bar one or two, have something to do with the cold. Whether it's hiking up Kilimanjaro with just shorts on, or staying submerged in ice up to his neck for 1 hour and 45 minutes, some kind of record as well. Actually, that particular feat was of interest because that was when the research and the scientific world sort of had attention, like paid attention towards him. I think it was on Dutch television, and of course they kept pouring. It was in a big perspex container. They kept pouring the ice in, and it went up to here. They were reading his biometrics, all of his information, heart rates, core temperature, everything like that. And of course, he was doing his thing. He was breathing. He's adapted to the cold beforehand. But they actually, you saw his temperature was staying around the same. Of course, that they were like, okay, this is interesting. We need to study this guy. That led to that study that you referred to. And of course, Wim himself, they injected him with the endotoxin first. He did his breathing techniques. He's the cold as well, exposed to cold. And they found that this endotoxin, which would usually give you some sort of like flu-like symptoms, none of these signs, like his temperature, wasn't elevated, anything like this. Everything remained relatively kind of normal for him. But then, of course, the question comes: okay, you're a freak or a superhuman. So, like, and what about normal people? What about the rest of us? So that's why they got I think it was 10 or 12 of the guys came in, males. They were actually too. Sorry for our lady listeners, our female listeners, but there were 12 males, I believe. They came in. They also got injected by the endotoxin, and they've been training with Wim for about 6 or 7 days just beforehand. And as it turns out, like basically none of them got any signs. I think one had a mild headache. So then, of course, the idea was, okay, we really need to find out what's going on here. And what ended up happening is that they discovered was when you're exposed to cold temperatures for some minutes at a time, somewhere between 2 to 5 minutes, especially, is enough to make this reaction. This norepinephrine and cortisol markers are elevated. and that kind of suppresses the innate immune response, which means your white blood cells. It kind of resets your white blood cells or your cytokines inside in your blood. And this is like an effect that lasted for about 6 to 7 days in the subjects. So that's the thing. So it's kind of like once a week you need to have this kind of prolonged exposure to cold, which brings us a little bit back to the cold shower, because in a way it's like I would like to also see some further study about the cold shower, because you're not actually submerged in the water. You know what I mean? Like we're talking about ice bath level cold exposure, or those pictures you're referring to earlier. There's me in the Baltic Sea and these kind of scenarios, or in the sea where you are as well. You're situated. It's cold enough. This is the level of cold exposure that had been being utilized there in these studies. But of course, the way we teach it is that it's almost quite confronting in the morning for somebody if you're saying, "Hey, listen," like I love to say to people, "Hey, make your bed." Thanks to our friend Jocko Willing for that. Make your bed. It's kind of like ticking the box. It's a form of progress, and then go from your bed straight to the shower and have a cold shower. And you kind of build up this mindset there as well, where you're kind of succeeding. And each morning, it's literally like the Matrix. It's right. It's like the blue or the red. Which one are you going to choose? It's like you would choose the blue or the red pill. So, and of course, we choose the cold. We choose the cold shower in the morning.
So that's a good segue too into, which I know a lot of people are going to want to listen about. We could talk about some of the other benefits, but I think maybe this is a good time to touch on how would you introduce a cold shower to someone there. So if I've never done it before, and I'm listening to this and I think, okay, actually, I quite like what Leigh's saying here, and I can. There's going to be some health benefits to me. Where do I even begin? It sounds like you just have a normal shower, and then you said the last 30 seconds, would you just slowly turn it into cold, or would you try shock yourself, like yank it all the way down and make it really cold?
Well, it's cool. Like, actually, I've done these cold shower challenges before, and yeah, I film myself in there. Like, not like the whole way. It's all PG. It's it's especially not in a cold shower, of course. But I'm guiding the people through there, and I kind of developed this. Like, I want it to be relatable for people, right? So if you've ever been in a swimming pool before, there's usually a couple of different types of people that'll go into a swimming pool. There's the people that go to the ankles. There's the people that go to the knees. There's the people that go to about the waist, and then there's the person. Then it's usually a little bit of a sort of a plunge in, or a keep the head above. And then there's those of us who just jump in. So I think, like I set it up. I've introduced the cold showers to people where you can do it in 3 stages. And first of all, the timing. You can definitely start with warm. That's no problems at all. It's actually pretty nice for your lymphatic system as well, and give yourself a little bit of a flush of the toxins early in the morning. But then I would say at least for 20 or 30 seconds at the end of your shower, you can either just in 3 steps, like 1, 2, 3, slowly go cold, and then the third one being all the way cold, or you can basically, like you said, shock yourself like that. But if you're going to do that, I would say that just gently allow the water to move over your chest. You can kind of move around slightly like that, but I would never really suggest or recommend that somebody would go ahead and just put the cold on and then put their head under straight away. Especially in the morning, if you've been laying down and you literally walk straight to the bathroom in the morning, your blood pressure can be still a little bit rising and stuff, and you don't want to give too much of a shock like that. But it's pretty simple. I mean, it's just let the cold water splash on your front, maybe on your back like this, and then you're just kind of trying to breathe calmly and lengthen the exhale. That's the way to calm the nerves and sort of enjoy it. Enjoy the sensations, feel the sensations on your body, and don't try and resist that too much. Like, I think people often, it's sort of like you see people tense up a lot, and you don't want to be tense. You want to allow the blood to flow a little bit more freely.
Yeah. And I guess, would you also then think shivering is a positive sign or a negative sign in someone?
Um, well, look, shivering is not necessarily. It's we are kind of. I don't want to say conditioned, but we are sort of like, to our eye, we're trained to see if somebody's shivering, it's sort of a form of weakness. It's sort of like, oh, can't handle something, or shielding, or something like this kind of defensive posture. Um, Whereas if you really think about it, shivering is actually your body just giving you the energy. You're asking, okay, I'm cold. You know, you're under the cold. You're outside. You're dressed inadequately, or you're not used to the cold. Whatever the situation is, and then you feel this little like this. It's literally just your body signaling, okay, here's the energy. You know, and that's why you see Wim Hof, and when we do we instruct the courses, you see the people doing this kind of Tai Chi, like we call it horse stance, but it's literally just moving the blood around the body, and it's at the same time sort of channeling that movement into a bit more. I mean, it's not. Let's say, like, aesthetically, it's not really good when you have a class of 25 people going ooh like this,
Yeah.
right? But it's also, it feels nicer. It feels much more nicer, controlled, and it kind of gives your body this kind of nice, gentle way. You know what happens, right? The veins constrict. So when you're cold, the veins constrict, and then you're basically, the warm blood's actually circulating around your vital organs. So your body's basically saying, "Okay, I got this, no problems," right? And your fingers, first thing you'll hear with people when they're cold is the fingers are cold and the toes are cold. And your body's literally telling you, like, literally sending you the strongest signal it can to say, hey, don't stress about the small stuff. I'm telling you, like, your body's saying to you, I'm telling you, that's don't worry about those. I've got you. I'll keep the warm blood circulating around your vital organs, your heart, your lungs, everywhere. And it does that by constricting the veins to your arms, to your extremities, to your toes, and then through that movement at the end, we're kind of gently moving that more warm blood back through the body again. We don't want to expedite that too quickly, because
Because
you don't want to pour too much of that cooler blood straight through the heart.
Yeah, and because I'm just also thinking for a beginner here who's listening and they're going, all right, I'm going to, tomorrow morning I'm going to have that cold shower. But yeah, they're going to start shivering and think, oh my God, how does he do this? And how did, I feel like I don't know if I can do this again. But so in this
Yeah,
kind of situations, I'm wondering, so if someone feels like they're shivering, it's okay. That's a natural response. You're going to be doing that. And maybe that
yeah,
shiver reaction is going to calm down over time, over a period. You would expect that to
yeah. Of
change.
course. Yeah, the best way, that's when we would, I might take the opportunity to also say, like, if people are like investigating the Wim Hof method and all this sort of thing, of course there are the two components. There is the breathing that everybody is familiar with, and then there's the cold, and we don't want to mix the two. We don't want to. It's really important for people to understand. We don't want to do this deep breathing, and then jump into the cold shower, because there can be some, change of blood pressure and things like that, and then you pour a bunch of cold water on yourself. You can pass out, you can fall over, these kind of things. So we just really want to separate those two things. However, when you have had the cold shower and you've kind of calmed your breathing, you're relaxed, you're sort of like lengthening the exhale, you're lowering the heart rate, you're saying, okay, this isn't so bad. There are those moments, as you're explaining, where we kind of get that little, ooh, 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 the little jaw starts going, oh, hang on, something's happened here. In those cases, I would say it's important not to do what we were just saying before. Don't come in here. Don't sort of like try and like wrap yourself up, curl yourself up on the couch and wait till it's over or something like that. Just gently move around. Just gently move around. If you're I don't know, it depends what situation you're in. You can just move yourself to the kitchen. You can make some. You can sort of like. It usually doesn't take long. If you're only 20 or 30 seconds, it's just walking once or twice around the house gently. It's enough to get the blood flowing, and then you're like, okay, I feel great now. I mean, that's usually literally how it was for me when I first started.
Hmm.
In a few years back now. But yeah, I mean, you just gently want to move the blood through the body. What we don't want to do, for any beginners, is we don't want to drop down and do 100 push-ups really quickly. Okay, so we don't want to really expedite that process of that the cold blood actually going straight through the heart again or anything like that. So just gentle, slow movement. That's why I walk some gentle pacing through the house or walking from one room to another. It's usually enough. It's usually enough for people. But if we get down and do 100 push-ups real quick, we're kind of like expediting that process, and it's best to let that occur a little bit more naturally, you know.
So that's a good tip there, is don't stress yourself after that cold exposure there. Don't, if you're at a gym in the morning, don't try to do a cold shower, then go out and do a big workout straight away.
Yes, and that's a really nice segue to the next usual question is from this kind of thing is like, can I do the cold after a workout? I don't know if you want to touch on that at all, but
For sure.
So usually, like, studies are now showing that cold after, like, let's say resistance training, regular workout, resistance training, actually is not a good idea. Generally speaking, it's not a great idea. Why? Well, because if you've been lifting, we pump the biceps or get that hypertrophy kind of reaction in the body from lifting weights, resistance training. What we want to do is we want to allow the body to have that natural inflammation. It's all about blood flow as well. So the best thing you can actually do after training is have your protein or whatever sort of nutrients you want to introduce into the body. But then actually the sauna is the best. It's the best thing to do after. Where it changes a little bit is when you end up having sort of like a performance athlete, somebody who's training intensively. I'm talking about like a 3, 4, 5 times a week training for a football team or Olympic athlete or someone like that. We start to see a good, when they're not particularly training like resistance or trying to build muscle, it's actually a good thing to do to like recover the joints and the tendons and ligaments and these different tissues by having the cold after the training. So it's okay. Like, that's why you see a lot of these mixed martial artists that jump in the ice bath after they've been rolling in the mats and doing jiu-jitsu all day or hitting the pads and things like that. So that's the thing. So to summarize, what we want to do after resistance training, we don't want to do the cold after resistance training. We want to get to the sauna if you can, because your human growth hormone factor increases, your testosterone levels increase as well. And then not only that, but you get that, in a sauna, you're getting that blood flow, your veins are opening up, the blood's circulating really freely in the body. If you've had your post-workout nutrients, shake, whatever your weapon of choice is, it's just going to flood the tissues with the nutrients straight after. Whereas if you think about having a cold shower, like a cold, if they have a plunge tank or something like this, an ice bath in some cases, if you partake in that after, your veins are going to do this. You're not going to get the blood flow, and it basically suppresses the inflammation in the body, which is what you actually want. That's what we're aiming for after we want to allow that to occur naturally in the body after your training, so that the healing and reparation process can sort of like start already after your workout.
Yeah, so that's a great one, because I'm sure people have watched elite athletes on TV. I can, being South African, I can think of rugby players. You talked about MMA players. I'm sure American football players, people who do a lot of contact sport. When they finish competing, you may see them on the sideline jump into an ice bath. But in that case, that's a good thing for them to help minimize the injury component. But if you're training to grow muscle and build muscle, then the ice is not ideal straight after a training session.
Exactly. And especially sports where there could be some sort of, like, the sports you've mentioned there are very contact sports. There's a lot of contact going on there. Definitely boxing and this kind of thing for sure. Rugby, you got guys just shoulders bruised, corks. You get these muscle. Goodness me, I remember that's taking me back to my rugby days now. Thinking about all the corked thighs I would get and all this sort of stuff, but those kind of sports where there's this heavy contact, where there's like a tissue, like this kind of thing, I think it's actually a pretty good thing. And especially when it's more like let's say it's more like a cardio related sort of sport, so you can kind of give the ligaments and joints a bit of a rest and suppress the inflammation. Whereas if you want to introduce the inflammation to the body, you just want to let it occur. So that's why that's talking about weightlifting and resistance stuff.
And so do you also see that a benefit then, it being in Finland and talking about sauna, that it's traditional that you do the heat and then you jump straight outside into the cold in the snow or the water or a cold shower. So the reason I asked that is because I came across someone, because saunas are quite popular now, getting home saunas for various reasons. But someone was discussing how for their autonomic nervous system, so their anxiety or their stress response, that they found they do cold and then the heat. Or do you find if someone's trying to relax their nervous system, the heat and then the cold is still a good thing?
I would say to me, cold is active in a sense. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a sympathetic response. Like, how do you feel if you go into the cold? You're like alert. You'll get your pupils dilate. You're starting to breathe more. You're going into this kind of, well, now it's fight, flight, or fright or freeze. Now that it's showing this kind of, we used to think it's fight or flight only, but we're not seeing so many people nowadays when there's a terrorist shooting. We're not seeing that fight thing anymore, are we? We're not seeing someone run at the gunman or whatever. It's more kind of like protection and freeze and protect yourself. But when you're in the shower, when you're in the cold, I mean, you're in this kind of like more sympathetic drive. Whereas if you go to the sauna, I feel everything slows down. Everything kind of feels more sort of comfort, like relaxed, There is a nice play between the two. There is a really nice play between the two. And I think a lot of people are starting to introduce this as just a sort of circulatory system workout as well, especially after training. You can kind of like dabble, go back and forth between the two. But to be honest, I think, like for me personally, it's more cold during the morning to wake up and get be in that more active state in the morning. And in the evening, I'm by the way fortunate enough to have a sauna in my apartment, so I can get my 4 to 5 times a week, which is what I do, which is what's recommended in a Finnish study, of course. That's a perfect way for me to sort of like relax, and usually after training of some sort of description, and just kind of relax and get into my sleep mode, So, and just on that, by the way, I think all of those, I would say probably about 85% of those pictures that you were mentioning about Instagram and all that you've seen me in some body of water, I would say 85% of those times, maybe higher, it's just the cold. There's no sauna waiting for me on the shore somewhere. There's I'm working with the cold after that, So I think there's a real value to, I mean, I often think of the cold and the sauna as completely separate things. They're nice. They're nice. It kind of extends the fun a little bit more, Like you have a cold dip in the Baltic Sea, you're hanging out there for a few minutes, someone goes in, then you're waiting, and then it's your turn. And then you move around, you work with the cold a little bit, then you kind of get dressed, you towel off and you get dressed, and then it's like, okay, that was good 15, 20 minutes total. But if it's a more of a social setting, I think the sauna is a really nice, it kind of adds a lot of value there. But to be honest with you, I'm really all about feeling things, I don't want to shirk away from any of those things. I want to work with it. I want to feel those sensations in the body. I want to feel my body and my cells waking up. And I want to know what I'm capable of. I want to know that I can handle those things. And also, again, if you go quickly, well, probably one of the worst experiences I've ever had was when I went too quickly from the cold into the sauna. Got all excited, plenty of adrenaline. Actually, I was with another Wim Hof method instructor, so there might have been this kind of silent competition going on because we met each other for the first time. So we were in the Baltic Sea, and we were kind of looking at each other like, should we go get out now? It was like 5-6 minutes or something. So we got out of there, and we spent about, I would say, 30-40 seconds kind of with the, moving around and stuff. And then we were like really chatting away and like, yeah, because we had all those nice happy hormones pumping through the veins. And then we went straight to the sauna. And almost immediately, as soon as we got in here, I felt this really, really uneasy feeling. Both of us did. We looked at each other. I said, I got to get out of here. This is not the time to kind of sit there and, let the ego take over here. So we both got out, and I said, hey, listen, let's sit outside for a while, because we'd gone in way too quickly after that kind of, usually it's the other way. Like, people are more concerned about going from the sauna, jumping into the cold. But I've always found that fine. If we have the ladder, so usually you can just kind of like step down the ladder. But I love jumping in. I love submerging the face and the head as well. But the other way is in my opinion, a bit more of a danger. Like I've had probably more negative experiences, or sort of things where I'm like, whoa, hang on a second. When I've gone to the heat too quickly after the cold, huge pressure in the head and things like that.
Yeah, and that's a good segue to, or just I'm thinking here relating back to people who are just doing showers. So they may think, should I do the cold and then and finish off with the hot to relax? But in this case, it sounds still that, what we're talking about is more extreme temperatures from Baltic Sea to sauna. But even here, as a basic, you could have your nice warm shower, but it's still a benefit to finish with the cold then.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, let's be honest. There's just there are, like, even for me, there's just days where you're like, you know what, I just want a warm shower, okay? and there's nothing wrong with that. It's okay. You don't lose any cool points, or they don't revoke your certification for Wim Hof or anything like that. But it's okay to start with that. But I think depending on what you're trying to achieve in the day and what kind of person you are. I mean, we're talking about biohacking here, right? We're trying to get the most out of ourselves. We're trying to make things efficient. We're trying to get into those states. Do you really want to, do we really need to have all this kind of external stimulation? Like, do we really need the coffee? Like this one, that one, this one? All I'm saying is that all I'm offering is that finishing on the cold, you will feel it. You will feel the lift in your mood. You'll feel the sort of sensations. You're definitely going to have those happy hormones pumping through the veins first thing in the morning, and you'll just have energy, And if you've made your bed and you've had the cold shower, you'll have ticked a couple of things off, and you'll be like, okay, the day is the world is my oyster today, Like let's get it on. So I'm kind of like, you can just build. It's a good platform to build the rest of your day. It's like a springboard in a way.
Mm-hmm. So for beginners too, or even intermediates, would you suggest that people do this consecutively for X amount of days? So like try at least have this cold shower for the next 7 days, 30 days straight. And then once you're into the groove and you're comfortable with your cold, that you only need to do it like your sauna only 4 or 5 times a week or 3 times a week or something.
To be honest with you, most people that work with me, they end up doing they're still on the cold showers. They're on day 100 or year or whatever it is. At least they tell me that. But like I said, you don't lose anything for having a warm shower. But what I'm saying is that people just end up enjoying that energy and enjoying that burst that they get in the morning. So much that they just basically flip the switch. It's just cold,
Mm-hmm.
And again, sometimes you sleep a bit funny, you have a bit of a tight neck, and you just like to have a bit of warm water run over that and sort of like massage, or like sort of move around a little bit. But then you can soap up during that time. Then you have the cold shower, and literally, if I have someone to do that for 3 weeks, which is about 21 days, it's this magical number that a lot of researchers have felt that that's the way to introduce a habit or get rid of a habit, or change some behaviors in the brain. the first week I would tell people try and within that first week get to about 1 minute. Can you have 1 minute in the shower? And of course, starting with 20, 30 seconds, doing that consecutively, and then, okay, if you haven't done it by the seventh day, yeah, okay, let's just give it 1 minute. Second week, I would say, okay, now let's keep it at 1 minute. And you're kind of getting this gradual cold exposure like this, where your kind of body's like accepting that. There's some small adaptation occurring, of course. And then by the third week, we're kind of like maybe the last couple of days, we're saying, okay, give it a go. Try the full cold shower now. See how you feel. Can you do that? So, and by the end of this 21-day cold shower challenge, we basically got like the majority of the people are like doing a full cold shower, and they're like, "Oh my god, I feel great. I feel amazing."
Yeah, that's a great challenge. So by the end of 21 days, you wouldn't have even turned on the hot. You go straight into the cold and you can handle it.
Yeah, that's the thing. We try and give the people an opportunity to do that like once or twice towards the end. And by the last day, like I'm not joking either. We had like 650 people went on to I don't know if everyone was doing that, but of course, when you have the Instagram stories or whatever, you can see how many times somebody's like checked that. And people are just flooding, like asking me, like thanking me, saying, "Hey, this is great." It's like, "Hey, it's up to you. You're the one who's doing it. You're turning up every day and doing it." But I think we all, at the end of the day, there's so much information out there, and it's just nice to have some kind of format to do that, and it's nice to have a little bit of framework to follow. And yeah, sure, have somebody to kind of hold your hand, virtually hold your hand, to do that, and kind of get that, you get the power of the group and the support of the tribe.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly also what these podcasts are about, is to help someone anywhere in the world right now. So you could be at any latitude, longitude, whatever country. Hopefully you've got running water and you can just practice this. And be inspired by you to say, okay, I heard Leigh and it doesn't sound too bad, and I know the steps now and what to do and what to watch out for.
And yeah, absolutely, mate. It's great. It's great work what you're doing. And just on that point as well, I would say that like for anybody who's we didn't talk too much about brown fat, which is something from Wim Hof method as well, and we studied with Wim Hof, let's say. But this brown fat that's sort of naturally occurring in the body, 18 degrees Celsius and below is where that starts to produce. The body starts producing that. So 18 degrees and below. So for those people in Florida, or those people in summertime in Joburg or in Australia or wherever, if you can get to the water where it's 18 degrees and less, it's enough to have an effect.
Mm-hmm.
So that's usually what people are saying. How cold's cold? And as cold as you can have it, of course, but just keep in mind that 18 degrees and less, you're getting an effect. Something from 12 and below is a pretty good hit of cold, or a dose of the cold exposure.
So I'm just looking that up now. So for anyone in the US on Fahrenheit, that's 64 Fahrenheit is 18 degrees Celsius. So you're saying anything below that is where you're going to get the benefit. And as long as your cold water supply in your home is that temperature, then you're getting the benefit.
Yeah, that's the other variable that we that we can't always control. That's why I think it's great. I mean, like in Australia, for example, the guys are really taking to that, especially in the summer. It's kind of like a little festive kind of thing that people like to do now, where they get the everyone chips in for a big bag of 20 kilos of ice, and then they throw it all in, and then they have these little pools or the plunge tanks or what have you. And they're just doing this, and they're all dancing around the thing. It's a great social thing. But that's the summertime's the sort of like the easy thing, the easy time. And then the real challenge is like turning up like and doing that in the morning time, where you're kind of like, oh, and you kind of, when you're tired, comfort is the thing. It doesn't matter if you're on a long flight from one side of the world to the other. You just want to feel some form of comfort, when you wake up out of the bed and you've had a little bit of it doesn't matter what kind of sleep you've had. It doesn't matter. Usually when you wake up out of bed, it's like, okay, well, the default mode is actually the warm shower. And what we're trying to just we're trying to offer people is like, if you start the day outside of the comfort zone, then everything's possible from there. So that's the cool thing. We're trying to create the default is the blue tap, the blue pill in the matrix, or the cold shower.
Mm-hmm. And that also is something I want to ask you was winters. I mean, your winters are cold. So you could even still have a cold shower in your home and it's freezing outside. And so you would still recommend people practice cold shower training in wintertime too.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Well, when you think about it, you're probably going to be exposed to cold less in the winter, right? Because you're rugged up, you've got your jackets on, you've got gloves, scarves, everything. That you don't want to hang around outside too long. You're getting, you're quickly scuttling from one mode of transportation to another, or one building to another because it's snowing or it's ice on the ground. You're just trying to get out of there. So in most cases, that's when people experience the cold the least. So the water in the tap is real cold. I mean, it's even this time of the year, you can get a pretty, like this morning. Hey, I felt it this morning, that's for sure. But the air temperature, there's a certain amount of cold you get, but you have to seek that in the winter. That's why we do those cold. That's why we like, actually not too far from where I'm sitting now. There's the little, we call it avanto. That's a Finnish word for hole in the ice. And you got to dig that out. And anyone who wants to try that stuff, if you're in a cold climate and you're like, well, okay, let's do this. Don't. I would recommend not to do it so that you would swim around first for a while. That's swimming around in cold bodies of water, where it's, especially when if it's frozen water, or like Baltic Sea is like +2, and it's like, by mid winter, it's like we're talking about 30-40 centimeters of ice that forms there, because we have very low salt content. Like, it's not much salt in the water, so the ice can actually form. But what I'm always doing or encouraging people, and where I always make the hole here, like it's a public hole that I make, so anyone can go there anytime, at their own responsibility. But it's always a hole that somebody can stand in, for like just about anyone can stand in, and you can actually just duck. You kind of like crouch on down in there, so it's a safe. You can hold on to the side and you can crouch on down in there. I've never done it before where I've just taken people to open water for the first time and have them swimming around, because there's just a lot going on there. It's people call me crazy because I'm more scared of what the murky waters of the Baltic Sea and these lovely lakes that they have here than the Australian beaches. At least in the Australian beach, you can it's like the visibility is pretty good. You can see, okay, there's fish over there and all that sort of stuff, and the sand on the ground. And it's not the same over here. So it's kind of like the fear of the unknown a little bit. So I just like to keep it nice and close to shore and just have the people just ducking down in there, and then you can help them out of there, and you keep it real hygienic in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
and safe for people.
Oh, great. Well, Leigh, we've been talking for nearly an hour here, and I think I've learned quite a bit already from yourself. So many great tips that you shared there about cold showers. I know that we've also touched on the deeper cold, I'm going to call it, as you were talking about there at the end. And that's something that someone would need guidance and training for. And so in this case here, if someone wants to contact you, keep in touch with you, find out more about services you may offer to help people, what are the best links or social media places that you would recommend people to go to?
Oh, to contact me directly, just my name on Instagram. That's the place where most people find me. Leigh Ewin, one sort of word, no gaps in between, no capitals, just all lowercase. Leigh Ewin. You can find me there, or then I have a website where I have my events and happenings there. It's flowness.io. Yeah, and they're the two best places. And then, of course, there's all these different certifications that I have, and, Wim Hof, wimhofmethod.com. You can go there if you're interested in learning more. I think they have a little free course that you can do there, so you can kind of get some experience with it and see what it's all about. And then, of course, all the different courses and workshops that are there. But yeah, I would just recommend that anybody give it a go. Give it a go, challenge yourself. You can do it. The body's made for that. That's the message. It's if you have cold fingers and toes when you're in the cold, congratulations, you're a perfectly normally functioning human being. That's the message. It's
Perfect.
exactly how it's supposed to be.
Well, that's a perfect little test I think anyone can do. So, Leigh, I just want to say thank you again. I'm going to link to all those in the show notes for people. And yeah, that was a great interview. Thank you again.
Pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me.